while you put your questions together, I owe a certain brother by the name Augustine. I owe him, apparently he's not here, but his question is very powerful and very important. I owe him the answer to a question he asked me while he was doing his School of Royalty, and I promised to answer, but I didn't get the time, I didn't get the opportunity to, because we had gone 3-4 hours overboard that meeting, and so I needed to close it, but I promised him I'll find time to do it, and I hoped he'll be here and he can hear the answer, because I think it's like 3, 4, 5 months maybe since he asked the question, and I just want to give it a shot. The question was, if it is true that there was a flood in the days of Noah and all of mankind was wiped out, except those that were in Noah's ark, and if you read it, in Genesis 6 and 7 all the way through 8 and 9, God was angry because the imaginations of the hearts of men were wicked continually, and there were giants in those days and afterwards. So one of the reasons God wiped the earth is the wickedness of the hearts of men, but also that breed that we had generated that God didn't make, of extra big, humans with extra size and extra strength, the giants, the Nephilims. If the flood was true and no Nephilim made it into the ark, how come in the days of Moses and Joshua and David, we still see some sons of the giants in the story, and we see, the people of God fighting against these gigantic human beings and all of that, maybe until after the days of David, and then there was silence about it because David killed the giant of Gath, and his mighty men killed the brothers of the giant of Gath, and then so how did they make it past the flood if the flood wiped out every unclean thing, including the giants? Is that a legitimate question? It is? Okay. So let's look at that. Well, the way to handle a question like that is to think spiritually, archaeologically, and historically. If we have these 3 angles, we may arrive at something. But let me clearly say that we will never make doctrine about anything the Bible doesn't emphatically say in white and black. But we can create deductions, we can come at conclusions, we can extrapolate, we can combine scriptures, but we must never we must never present it as the word of God if it isn't written in black and white. So I'm going to be doing some extrapolations, and I'll be leaving what you feel, because it's not written in white and black. But we can look at all the stories, look at archaeology, look at spirit history, and then we can arrive at something. Number 1, there's a possibility, some people say that because the Bible is not arranged in order of history, some detail, and they didn't have the kind of stopwatches and computerized time clocks and everything that we have today, that there's a possibility that some of the stories we read are not exactly in their correct chronological, historical sequence. Okay? So that could create a bit of confusion. That's one thought. It's a very weak argument, because we know how many generations from Adam, Noah was. And so we should be able to tell that the flood happened early enough for every other story to be behind it. But there's that school of thought, and you can drive it to a particular limit and get some good stuff out of it. But it's rather weak, but it exists. Are we together? Number 2, there's another angle you can take, and you would understand or realize that the sons of God having affairs with the daughters of men may not be the only way to produce gigantism in the earth, because medical science shows us that even today, if you look at the Guinness Book of Records, you see that some men were actually extra tall, and so tall that if you arrange the 10 tallest men in that order, the shortest of them will still be over 7 feet. And so if you saw any of those persons, or you have a brother that's like that, and you have a little bit of Bible knowledge that's not complete, you can just feel like your mother gave birth to a Nephilim, but not accurately so. Okay, so there's also the side that some people could have just been born out of some random, genetic combinations and everything, and could just have extra height. And because the people of the old and Middle Ages only knew extra height and extra size to be Nephilim, they didn't have science to explain any other way people can be extra height. They will call everybody who's taller than everybody else Nephilim or Anakim or something like that. Do we understand? That's another way to look at it. The third way to look at it is we can investigate the wife of Ham, the son of Noah, because if you study women, they are really, what their names are, womb men. They are men with womb. They have the capacity to collect and hide all kinds of traits that may be, there, but recessive in a way. So there is also the way you can look at it and say the reason why we have some giants after the flood, although the flood was to wipe out all the giants, is that one of the wives of the sons of Noah had recessively genetic combinations from Canaanite root, such that giants were wiped out. But when Ham went into his wife, she could have produced a giant because she may have had the traits. Definitely not the son, because the son is from Noah's line, but the wife was brought into the family. So if we check it out very well, the wife of Ham is the greatest suspect in that family to have reintroduced giants back into the planet. So they had been wiped away, but somebody was carrying the gene and then produced giants in the earth. So the Nephilims trace back to falling angels. Is that true? So what's their genealogy? Falling angels, Nephilims, giants in the earth, then the Anakims, the Raphazims, depends on which story you're looking at. Moses' story, Joshua's story, or David's story. But at the end of the day, what happens is that the flood wipes out all the giants. Ham's wife may have been a bank for, for giant DNA. It came back into the system, and then they propagated so fast that the whole Canaanite nation, remember when the spies were sent out, they said there were giants in the land and we were like grasshoppers before them. So one of the reasons why the people had to go through that route, the longer route, with Moses, was because God wanted to wipe out the traces of the giants that were left behind. And so there was all that war against, but remember that they were not all killed after the Exodus with the wars, in the wars that the Jewish people had with them. Some of them were driven out of the land, and Moses, Joshua were able to eventually localize them into a particular area where they stayed until the days of David, which was Gath. They were from Gath. And how many of you remember the king of Bashan, Og? If you read, there's a particular man called, the king of Bashan, Og, the king of Bashan. You read his story, you see that he had, his story is in Moses' story. He was one of the kings they met on their way out. And what we know about the king of Bashan is that his bed was so big. He was a giant. His bed was described. They had a ginormous bed, and maybe it was this whole length. And so we knew that if he was the king and born of that blood, the people from there were giants. So they met giants. They killed some. They chased some out. So there were still giants remaining. But in the day of David, all the giants were destroyed. Okay? Saul killed some, left some, but David destroyed everyone after. So these are some of the thoughts from the weakest to the strongest that describe why we were able to still read about giants a little bit after the flood that was to wipe all of them out had happened. Useful? Okay, so thank you. Yes.